Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual public hearing for the Community Development Administration, CDBG-DR, which stands for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery. My name is Rashonda Alexander, and I serve as Director of Compliance for the Community Development Administration. And we have on the webinar today with us various team members from CDA and our consultant ICF. Please feel free to introduce yourself. Let's start with Lisa, who's leading up our CDBG DR work and program initiative. You're on mute, Lisa.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Jones. I am the program manager for the Disaster Recovery Grant. Welcome to our virtual hearing.
Hello, everyone. Tom Nagel here. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Community Development Administration. So that means I do the public relations, and hopefully you received our email newsletter, and that's what got you here. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeree Hoskins. I am a grant administrator with CDA. Also, will be working on the CDBG-DR program as well.
Hi, good afternoon.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Narducci. I'm with ICF. We're a consulting firm that the city has hired to help support implementation of the CDBG DR grant.
So let's just jump right into it. Here we are. We're going to run through our agenda, which just consists of our introduction. We're going to talk about the disaster impacts and risk index, our unmet needs analysis results, our proposed action plan activities, and the corresponding timeline. And then we're going to have an opportunity for any discussion and comments from you. So who is CDA? We serve as the clearinghouse for federal, state, and local funds for the city of St. Louis. We're working to implement the mayor's economic justice agenda and fund a wide range of nonprofits through public services, building affordable housing, and then conducting neighborhood transformation activities. We do all of this in accordance with CDA Citizen Participation Plan and surrounded by these three premises from the Economic Justice Action Plan to empower, develop, and transform the city of St. Louis. The purpose of today's public hearing is to talk to you in depth about the CDBG DR grant and the allocation of over $25.8 million. It was in response to the 2022 historic flash flooding, and the city received a 6-year grant to implement activities in response to the damage for our citizens. So we want you to ask questions. We want you to really understand what is happening in your community surrounding unmet needs that didn't necessarily get addressed from FEMA or maybe SBA. Please provide us comments while the public comment period is still open. And then we're going to respond after hearing everything from you with a draft action plan that's describing how we plan to use this money on your behalf. Comments will be made here, or you can also send us an email, and you can also, you can send it through the regular mail as well. So what are CDBG funds? They are provided by Congress in response to disasters. They can be used for household relief and economic revitalization, planning and mitigation, and also housing. They're also used for unmet needs, but they must be tied to that specific disaster. So in our case, any unmet need that you had must be tied to the flooding of 2022. People eligible to receive the funds are, of course, citizens, but because we're the clearinghouse, what happens is the federal government, by way of HUD, gives money to cities and states. So that's why it says that who is eligible to receive funding. Of course you are, but it comes through state and local governments. And then we allocate those to programs throughout the city, nonprofit organizations, development organizations, and our local businesses. To do so, we must meet a national objective, and national objectives are benefiting those people that are low to moderate income citizens. It must prevent or eliminate slum and blight, and then it also must address an urgent need. Along with that, we must address a direct or indirect impact of the disaster that was covered by this congressional allocation, and it must be located in an impacted and distressed county. So the city of St. Louis had a declaration, so our entire city was considered impacted and distressed. In asterisks, you'll see that HUD grantees are to allocate 15% of the recovery disaster toward mitigation. And later on in this presentation, we'll talk about that. We are proposing these activities in response to the 22 flood: home repair, home buyout, flood response reserve, household relief subsistence payments, and also mitigation. Jumping into our disaster and most impacted and distressed areas. Just a few ago, I mentioned that the entire city of St. Louis was considered impacted. Specifically, it's considered most impacted and distressed, a mid area. And the city is required to spend at least 80% of all CDBG funds in the mid area. So in our case, 100% of the funds can be spent in the city of St. Louis. You'll see with this slide, a visual. It's really impactful because it shows that a lot of the distress calls from the United Way were centralized here in North St. Louis, but they're also scattered throughout the city. In our unmet needs analysis, we want to make sure that we're able to capture areas from loss that you didn't receive help from. The information collected through this discovery will serve as a foundation for us to prioritize and then fund various programs. We've discovered, with the help of our consultants, that owner-occupied homes, a total of over 2,400, experienced severe loss, like 7 homeowners here, over 38,000. And the same for renters. Let me move this here, a total of 1,700 renters. The minor and low for $500 to $1,000 was a majority of 1,200 people. So as we continue to do this survey, we want to make sure that we're addressing your specific needs. One of the primary concerns is to make sure that there's not a duplication of benefits. So throughout the flood, you may have gotten help from FEMA or from the SBA disaster loans, and that's great. You still may have some areas that they didn't cover, or you have a need that remains. That is what this money is going to be for. We want to drive that home. Throughout the city, we had damage to our facilities that exceeded $5 million. And that's what this slide is really talking about. While SEMA is still in the process of finalizing some of the assessment, it's still necessary that we repair the damage to some of our governmental buildings, including this 1900 Hampton Avenue address. Businesses suffered. We have 475 applicants here that experienced over $19 million of verified loss. And our community surveys show that most people would like to prioritize infrastructure to the neighborhood to prevent future damage and repairs to their home. Mitigation is something to prevent future disasters, and so the highest probability of impact and natural hazards are flood and extreme heat, tornadoes, thunderstorms, and then severe winter weather. That's from our assessment. We found that high hazard floodplains are located throughout the entire city, and they run in densely populated areas. So that means where a lot of people are, unfortunately, is where some of the hazard floodplains are. When doing a social vulnerability, we saw that moderate to high social vulnerability shocks and stress, such as flood hazards, exist in neighborhoods throughout the city. And you'll see like that the darker blue are what's considered, this is the city of St. Louis. This is the outline here. I don't know if you can see the cursor, it doesn't matter. But the darker areas have the highest social vulnerability here north, and then here, as we see, southeast. What do we propose to do? We talked about it in the beginning with household release and green infrastructure and flood response and other things. Let's drill down. We plan to allocate for our home repair program 5.8, and you'll see on the slide over $25.8 million throughout all of these programs, from home repair, home buyout, flood response, household relief, green infrastructure, and then flood recovery and mitigation. The maximum award for home repair is $50,000. Maximum buyout is $350,000. And we want to make a note that these are voluntary buyouts, and we've also been in consultation with MSD and other experts throughout the city who can help us inform areas that flood a lot, so that we can create a plan for buyout that is most helpful. Our home ownership program, we talked about that budget at 5.8 with a maximum award of $50,000. All of our beneficiaries must be LMI or socially vulnerable homeowner in the city of St. Louis, and it has to have occurred during the flood. So if your roof was a bad roof before the flood, and you can't use that as a way to repair your roof, you have to tie it back to the flood. Same with all of the programs, including this home buyout, flood response reserve, household release subsistence program. This is one to highlight. On the news, we saw a lot of cars underwater that have been flooded. And you said that we need our cars to be replaced, and we need help doing that. Some citizens still are without a car, and this is what we're proposing, to use $638,100 for, is to help replace or obtain vehicles necessary for your household transportation, but it will be through a waiver. This is not something that HUD normally deems eligible, but because of the unmet need analysis and your responses, we're going to go for a waiver to see if we can help provide this program. Green infrastructure. This will be in part a feasibility design study, but with the county, because we are a regional community experiencing, the effects of, they say it's 100-year flood every 20 years. So we need to do something that is well studied and planned out to prevent these horrible disasters. And then last, we have a mitigation planning program where we will allocate to 4 activities to mitigate flood hazard risk throughout the city. When is this happening? Lisa, do you want to talk about our action plan timeline?
Sure. I can talk about the action plan timeline. So we did a community outreach event on March 27th that was held at the Wold Center from 3 to 7 p.m. We had a mild turnout, which is one of the reasons why we are trying to get more become more visible for the public to get more input on how we should spend the money. The draft action plan was posted for public comment in June 3rd, and there is a 30-day comment period. The public hearings to comment on the posted action plan was June 20th of 2024. We had a public hearing last week from 10 to 11. The action plan included comments will be submitted to HUD in August 2024. And the anticipated HUD approval and grant agreement should be in October of 2024.
Thank you, Lisa. It's really important that we try to level set and be as transparent as possible. This is a process, and I know that it's been some time since the flood, but programs aren't expected to launch until the beginning of next year in 2025. But we are working to get it all done for you. Do you have any questions? Are there any people in, it's 22 participants I see here. Feel free to come online and ask us anything that you would like to know.
Yeah. STL TV, if you're there, okay, great. So we have the chat open to everyone. So feel free to raise your hand or just throw questions into the chat or Q&A, and we'll get to them. We do see a hand raised from Jari on CDA staff. So why don't you go ahead and ask away?
Okay, Rashonda, I had a quick question on page 15. When you were identifying the $5 million damage that was caused to the city-owned building, in the damage category, what does those letters mean? It looks like it was an E, and it had property damage, and it was like a G. What does those letters specifically mean?
Jeree, let me try to go back to the slide. Don't get
Okay.
dizzy, everybody. I'm doing my best to get to it pretty fast. I thought you were going to ask me about some letters that I can tell you off the top of my head, like LMI.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so E, public building, G, recreational, or other.
Those
I
are
can
just
answer that. So go ahead, Chris.
well, those are just letters for how FEMA categorizes public facilities. So when they come up with their tabulation of impact, they'll put all of the facilities into different categories, and this is just a category for public buildings, and G would be recreational types of facilities. I'm not sure, Anne, if you had anything to add to that.
No, that's exactly right. So FEMA Public Assistance Program is separated into alphabetical categories. And so, as Chris said, those are the categories of public assistance.
Okay, thank you. And I had one more question. I'm not trying to hog. Are there going to be funds available to help applicants who have been impacted but did qualify for the SBA loan? Is there any type of set aside for any loan repayment program for any of the applicants who were impacted by the disaster?
When you say loan repayment, can you be a little more specific?
So I'm gonna use myself as an example. I had got impacted by the floods in North St. Louis, and I got a small amount of assistance from FEMA, but I had to get an SBA loan. I was just trying to see, was there any kind of avenues with this allocation where a person like myself can apply for funding to help pay that loan back?
Yep, right now it's not one of our proposed program activities, but this is this space and forum to collect more data from those affected by the flood. And we will note that and see if it's something that we are able to do. I just want to lift up that not everything that we want, we can do. We have to get permission and we must make sure that it's an eligible program. So just keep that in mind, but we're going to do everything we can, even if that involves asking HUD for a waiver, like we're doing for the subsistence payments and the car replacement fund. Thank you for your question, Julie.
Thank you.
Okay, I did see a hand raised in the attendees, but it went okay. Devonte Saunders has a hand raised. So let's bring Devonte in. Okay, we should be able to hear you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is
Hi.
Devontae. I'm the neighborhood president of the College Hill Neighborhood Association. I just wanted to ask is this PowerPoint available where I could download it and share it with my community? I think it's pretty good PowerPoint, and I want to get this information out to people in my community.
Yes, absolutely. I put a link in the chat, which is the main URL for this program
it.
on CDA's website. So
Okay.
it'll be posted there. And I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat here. If you email me, oops, I put .org instead of .gov. Go ahead and email me, and when that's ready, I'll send that over to you.
Awesome.
And this public hearing is just one component of our community engagement. We had an open house back in, was that April, March, all the way back in March?
March.
Wow, time flies. So we'd be happy to go out and meet with your neighborhood and learn more as this process comes together.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I'll send you an email and
Super.
that's
Let's
all I
just,
had. Thank you.
great. Let's
We
go
would,
to the chat real
Tom, I
quick.
just wanted to say,
Oh, go ahead.
we also want to encourage them to take the survey that's on our website. And that can personalize the information that we get also.
Yes, definitely. I will put a link to the survey in the chat as well.
Isn't the survey closed at this point?
I believe we just closed it last week, actually. So, but we are still
Oops.
doing on the ground. If there's opportunities for community input, we'd be interested in meeting with anyone here. Okay, let's go to the chat. There's been some questions there for a little bit. Just starting from the top, Gina asks, have we, CDA, have we received this money yet? Have we received the funds?
Yeah, so we have not received the funding for this grant just yet. Meaning, okay, let me make sure that I say this correctly. We have been allocated the money by the federal government. We have also received permission to administer the grant through what's called an administration only aspect of the grant to allow us to get to work. And then we will draft an action plan with your comments and the proposed activities. We send that to HUD and then they read it over and say, okay, St. Louis, we agree with what you want to do. And then they rubber stamp it. They send us back a letter saying you are approved. And then we are able to get the remaining amount of the $25.8 million for this grant. All of it has to be approved by HUD before we could move forward and start spending. So this is a part of the process to get the remainder amount of the grant allocation. But that's a great question.
Great. Here in the chat, this comes from the Gamble family, and they are asking, and we've received this before in our last in-person public hearing, and I know we're working on this question. If homeowners have already spent funds for repairs due to the 2022 flood, are there mechanisms in place to reimburse the homeowners? They go on to add that residents affected by a flood 2 years ago should be reimbursed if their home repairs meet the guidelines. 2+ years of residents have not received actions to mitigate the repairs that their families need.
So we did, to Tom's point, get this question from one of our residents from the Ellendale neighborhood, and we took it back and are still working through what that could look like throughout the country. We haven't seen a lot of reimbursement programs that have been that we will be able to do because there are factors surrounding it. We're still trying to work out what we can do for the city of St. Louis. And I really want to toss it to our consultants at ICF because they had some specific examples that maybe will be useful for you right now during this hearing.
Yeah, thanks, Rashonda. I can try to support as long as you can hear me.
We can
I
hear
think
you.
Perfect. One of the things that we talked about today are just the challenges with federal funding. There are very specific requirements as it relates to the environment and lead-based paint. And so typically prior to the expenditure of federal funds on a rehab program, you have to do both an environmental review of the scope of work and its impact on both the house and the environment around, as well as a lead-based paint assessment. And depending on the amount of money, federal money invested, there are different levels of lead-based paint remediation. And so oftentimes reimbursement programs can be really challenging in backing into those two compliance areas. And so we're working with the city to get a better sense of the age of resources, because both environmental and lead-based paint are more complicated for older housing stock than newer. And so figuring out if we can build within our rehab program any policies around a case-by-case reimbursement, but that is still something that needs to be considered and approved by HUD. It is incredibly challenging to document compliance after the fact in order to allow federal funds to be used for reimbursement.
Thank you, Anne, for that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And these are new questions that we're hearing through these public hearings. So it's important that we're having these and finding those unmet needs as they come up. So any questions you have at all that for topics that aren't clear from our presentation, we really want to hear that all this information is very helpful. Let's stay in the chat for the next question. And this one's from Rob. And Rob, go ahead and raise your hand if I'm not asking this correctly. The question is, will 100% of the funds be put towards low and moderate income residents, or will there be a limited amount of provided to applicants? So if 100% doesn't go to those individuals, will the remainder be allocated? It sounds like if these programs are only for low and moderate individuals and there's extra funds, will those go to people of moderate and above income? I think that's the question.
Well, to answer, the LMI population are eligible applicants. So if the applicant does not meet that designation, the applicant wouldn't be eligible and as such, wouldn't be able to qualify for, CDBG DR funds. As for additional funds or remainder, we don't foresee having any additional funds specifically in our action plan. I believe our grant was 25.8, but we have well over $38 million in damage, but that's only from the federal system. When we factor in other numbers, it's, could even double or triple that. So we don't expect to have anything not allocated.
And Rob, go ahead and raise your hand or ask again if that wasn't clear. And I think for when we're talking about applicants, we're talking about things like that home repair program or that car replacement program. Is that correct?
Yeah, the home buyout.
And buyout, yes.
Mhm.
Rob has his hand raised, so I want to make sure we clarify this. So I'll bring Rob on. Rob, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead and clarify that question so we can make sure we answer it.
So yeah, based on the numbers that you guys have been mentioning, $38 million in I guess announced, like, submitted damages, correct?
Yeah, it's a federal database from HUD, and they produce some sources of information throughout for each city based on what they believe, and so that's the number that is an estimate from the federal government, which is we believe is really low, of the damage, the remaining damage from our flood, which is still doesn't even match our award.
Yeah, I guess based on the damages that I took on and my neighbors took on, I can understand how few homes that would actually help fix. But it just seems like the guidelines that you have in place make it impossible for anyone who actually needs this money to get it. And by the way, if you don't have this money yet and people still have to apply and jump through the hoops, it's going to be at least another year before they see it. So that's 3 years people have been living with destroyed homes, correct?
I think you are making a great point, Rob, and these guidelines are federal guidelines from HUD. The city of St. Louis, of course, would like to do what our citizens have been sharing with us, but this is a HUD grant, and because it's a federal grant, we have to follow their compliance about who is and who is not eligible. And that national objective, if you were to follow up, is to benefit an LMI population, one of them. To eliminate slum and blight is the second national objective. And then the third national objective is to meet an urgent need, which this does qualify for.
Correct. So assuming you are awarded the full 28 million,
25.8.
25.8,
Mhm.
100% of those funds will be allocated to LMI residents. None of
No.
it will be retained by the city of St. Louis.
So we're proposing a few different options. There is a home buyout program, a home repair program, green infrastructure, which we know, which benefits the entire city, and then a flood response reserve program that will benefit the entire city. But as far as I guess, I think I'm hearing what you're saying is, I'm not talking about the city, I'm talking about me and my neighbors and my house, and I'm not LMI. I don't know that you will qualify if you're not considered LMI, but I also will defer to our consultants who have been working throughout the country, and maybe they know something different. So let's see.
Well, just to clarify a little bit, HUD requires St. Louis to spend 70% of the grant on LMI populations. It has to benefit LMI populations, but that leaves 30% that does not necessarily need to benefit that population. So that funding would go to other needs that are not specifically LMI. And you know, any more assistance to LMI is up to the city beyond that 70%. For the housing repair program specifically, in the action plan, the draft action plan that's been published, it has been written to make eligible any homeowner, any homeowner regardless of income. But the city still needs to hit its target percentage of 70% within that population. So how the city does that will depend on who applies for the program and sort of how the programs work out and after the funding is awarded. But I don't think at this point that the program is limited only to LMI populations.
Okay, so I think my last final follow-up for this little series. Do the home buyouts qualify for the 70% LMI? Or is that separate from the program? Because if I assume the city is the one that would be buying derelict homes or damaged homes from this, is that how that would work?
Yeah,
So go ahead.
Chris, you can take it.
Okay. So a buyout program is a different program also funded under this grant or proposed under this grant. A buyout program makes eligible the purchase of homes that are at risk of flooding. And the city will pay, using this grant funding, to pay the homeowner to buy out their home and provide some additional assistance to relocate to a safer neighborhood, a safer area. And you know, I don't think that I'm looking at this. It doesn't limit the funding or the eligibility to low or moderate income households. It could be any household. Does that
So
answer your
basically,
question?
yeah, I think so. So any at-risk homes would be eligible, whether LMI or not, for a home buyout if deemed the correct level of risk. Yes?
That's right. And the city must define what risk area is. I mean, typically, you know, it could be a flood risk area, 100-year floodplain, but they have to define that area. And it's in technical terms, it would be a disaster risk reduction area. Is that clear?
Yeah, it's perfectly clear. I don't think I should ask any more questions based on that information.
Okay.
A lot of this is also described in detail in the action plan draft. You can look up each of the programs and look at, you know, who might be eligible according to, you know, what is proposed currently. And this comment period is an opportunity to provide, you know, verbal or written feedback or comments to the city, and the city will address those each comment within the action plan.
Okay,
Right.
thank you, Rob. I think that cleared it up. Does that work for you? Any other questions?
I mean, I could go on for an hour. with this. I don't think that's going to benefit too many people, but
Okay.
I just know that I'm in a 100-year floodplain. My neighborhood is, and the information you've provided answers the question. So I know my neighborhood association will be happy to hear that.
Excellent. And let's stay in touch. I'm dropping my email in the chat again. And if you have a neighborhood association, especially, and if you're over there in Ellendale, we visited a while ago, geez, back in January, and we'd be happy to meet again to discuss this in more detail.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And stick around if you have more questions, but let's get to some of the other patient people. They've had their hands raised for a while. Let's see if Gina is still there. Gina, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, the question that I have is this. So you guys will complete this whole process in October of 2024. So are you saying the applications won't open up until sometime next year? And then how long after you complete the application would the funds be dispersed? And then I understand that, there are income guidelines. What other guidelines or what other things that you need to provide in order to complete the application?
Sure. And Gina, just to clarify, for these different programs, there'd be an application, for home repair, for voluntary buyout, that car replacement program we mentioned. Is there anything particular that you're interested in?
Well, actually, I would be interested in the home repair. And so just like the other people who spoke, while I received some funding from some other sources, it was not enough to cover the repairs. And so, and because of where I live at, now rain is continuing to come into my house, and because that flood from 2022 messed my foundation up, and so that needs to be repaired. And so now the rain, whenever it rains, it just kind of comes in. So, the one gentleman said it best, 3 years out, and damage is still happening to people's property. But I would be most interested in the home repair and how long is that turnaround, and what would you need for the application?
Sure. I'm dropping in the chat that CDA currently has a home repair program that we've had for decades. And this funding for flood-related damage, we're going to be working off the model of our current home repair, but really ramp that up for flood damage. So I just dropped that chat or that link in the chat
The
now.
home repair program, I think one person said it best. The programs, they're great, but they don't necessarily help the people who really need the help. Because when I contacted them about just, the tuck pointing, because I was advised if you just had some of the tuck pointing done, that would kind of alleviate. They told me it would be 7 years before that could even take place. So, so me, because I spent a lot of money out of pocket to, cover some of the other damages for the flood, then that's, if it's going to take 7 years, then, I'll have to go ahead and try to cover that so that I can keep the water out of my house and keep it from doing any more damage. So while that, sounds great, yeah, 7 years is a long time.
Yeah, we hope to ramp this up. Rashonda, is there anything you want to add how we're going to kind of fit the disaster relief home repair component into kind of our existing things and hopefully bring that wait time down and et cetera with new resources?
Yeah, so we have been requesting more contractors and trying to build up capacity to get the work completed, because we do know that there is a strong demand for it. And as far as when the application will be out, or what will be required for the application, just if you receive proof from FEMA, or you have something from FEMA or SBA, that will show that you actually were affected by the flood. So we just need, that information to share. And then we'll have specific other data points. But right now, it sounds like you've already gotten an award from FEMA. So that will be helpful for us to determine, your eligibility. And then it was one more thing that is escaping me, duplication of benefits. So we wouldn't be able to pay for something that FEMA paid for previously, but it sounds like you do have a lot of unmet need. So
Yes, FEMA, they indicated that they could not pay for the damage that was done to the foundation. That was not a part of their program. And so, because that's what I asked them for, and they said they could not cover that damage, kind of a preventive measure, what the water done to the foundation and being able to prevent it from coming in, they could not do that. So then you stated you've got some more contractors. And so I hate to say this, but I don't hate to say this is a true factor. Nobody wants to come to North St. Louis. And so the contractors, they will not come to North St. Louis. So then how do you mitigate that?
they're going to have to come to North St. Louis. I mean, thank you for sharing that. They're going to have to come to North St. Louis because they will be helping us administer this program. And that's kind of a non-negotiable when you come to CDA, to say that you want to help CDA administer these funds. Part of that is going where the need is, regardless if it's north or south or east or west. In that mid area, they are required to go if they enter into a contract with CDA. So they won't really have a choice.
Yeah, Gina,
Okay.
I hear that attitude and that frustration and that sentiment and it frustrates all of us when we hear negative things like that. I think the team here at CDA, we want to assure you that we really ramped up our home repair program with tons of new contractors. And we won't get the map out now, but we're all over the city doing a lot of work. And please don't be concerned about where you live if work isn't going to happen. We're ramping up all over town. So
Okay. So I guess the only other question that was not answered is when will the applications be available? After October is what you're saying?
Yeah, so we have to go through this public comment period, which will be ending. It's coming up on the 8th, is it? I think it's July the 8th. And then we submit an action plan to HUD. Then we receive feedback from HUD, which we hope that is going to be a 2 thumbs up. We move forward around October. We start with program design and begin to launch programs early 2025.
Okay, so expect the application to be available sometime next year.
Yes, ma'am. And if you and our other attendees, feel free to drop your emails in the chat or as we also have a CDA newsletter. You can just keep in touch with us, because we've been extracting all types of citizen information so that when we do launch the programs and Tom sends out a blast, you're in that first, set of correspondence.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
great. And I just put that link to our newsletter in the chat. It's right there at CDA's homepage, city website.gov/CDA, and you'll find it. We're getting close to 7, so we're gonna take all these questions. We're not gonna end early. So I just want everyone to know that. So but I would like to politely ask as we go through the raised hands if we could just keep it very brief, not a respect of our time, but for everyone here. So let's see. Miss Williams has had their hand raised for a while. Miss Williams, Can we hear you? Can you hear us? Miss Williams, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear, we hear you.
Hi, hello everyone. My question was, no, I actually forgot my original question. Okay, it was, I think it kind of was answered. I was asking when will the applicants be notified that they've been approved for participation into the program? And my sub-question was, are there any partner programs that are responding before 2025?
Yeah, Miss Williams, and I believe you're talking about home repair. And
Yes.
our partner program, I put that link in the chat for
Mm-hmm.
current healthy home repair program. If you have needs now, go ahead and use the online portal or the hotline to get in contact with us.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's an urgent need, we don't want to wait. We want to hear from you as soon as possible.
Okay, and when you say hear from me, does that mean I can maybe enter the program?
Yes, if you have home repair, we want you to apply through our program that's set up now while we
Right.
wait to set up one that's just related to the flash flooding and the existing unmet needs and damage.
Okay, so when we do that, I'm gonna do that. When we do that, does that place us behind people who have already been on the waiting list? Or will we, have our own waiting list basically, and then perhaps be working through that?
Rashana, that's an interesting question. Do you want to take it or should I take it? Would you like me to?
Yeah, I was thinking if it's CDBG DR related, that's going to come from that specific funding source where it would have to have a tie back to
I'm not sure what
the
that acronym means.
oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for stopping me. So CDBG is a federal program that stands for Community Development Block Grant. So the federal
Okay.
government gives money to cities and states to administer public services, affordable housing, et cetera. So
Okay.
when disasters happen like fires, floods, tornadoes, Congress will allocate dollars. So in this case, they gave us disaster relief money. So that's what the DR stands for. So
Okay.
together is CDBG and then dash DR for the disaster. So if your home repair is tied to the flood, that would be a different funding source with a different list because
Okay.
it has to be your receipt or your eligibility for the disaster relief funds have to be tied to the flood. Are your home repairs tied to the flood or not?
Yes, and we did receive some help from FEMA.
Okay, so yeah, your list would be the one that's tied to the flood, so it would be disaster recovery.
Okay.
And so that will put you and your family into early next year when we'll start to launch programs.
Okay. So, okay.
Great. I hope that's helpful. Is there anything else, Miss Williams?
No, I don't necessarily think so, but since you asked, I might have one more question. Do you foresee any problems if a family has already participated in the Healthy Homes program? Do you foresee any problems with that being a conflict of interest and immediate denial?
I don't know how to specifically answer that unless the family were barred from the program previously. But outside of that, there wouldn't be a conflict because your family didn't know that this disaster was coming. So
Right.
you would be, you would be as eligible as anyone else. And if you met eligibility for home repair and then a disaster happened and you meet eligibility for home repair for the DR funding source, you're still eligible.
Okay. Because from my understanding, there's like a 5-year waiting period before you can like apply for that again.
Yeah, so it's a separate source of funds. So if your home repairs and are tied to the
The
flooding of
flood. Right.
2022,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, you would be eligible and you shouldn't have any issue as far as that's concerned.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Welcome.
All right. Well, I don't think I have any more questions.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Nagel.
Great. Let's go over to Steve Gibson, who has had their hand raised for a while. Hold on, let me. Steve, can you hear us? Can we hear you? Are you still there? I think you're muted. Steve, if you can unmute, try and bring you on. Okay. Steve, once you unmute, just let us know. Devante has their hand raised. And Devante, if you could just because you already asked a question, we'll just ask to be brief so we can get to some of the other questions. Oh, Devante's hand is lower now. So let's go to the chat here and just kind of we'll scroll down from where we left off. Antonio is asked, who will be repairing the houses if in the home repair program?
So they will be licensed and bonded contractors that have been vetted through our Healthy Home Repair Program that we've had in place with CDA for decades.
Great. Yeah, all trusted contractors that will be vetted. This one comes from the Gamble family. I think ICF might be helpful for some context with this program nationally. And we understand the frustration that we're trying to set up a program 2 years after a disaster. And a couple months after Congress gave us this award, we understand the timeline is frankly painful for families, but is 2 years ICF normal across the country for this type of disaster recovery funds to come to communities? And then I do know that the county also has a similar allocation, and they're putting a plan together too. And we don't gossip about the county. We know that we're going to get ours implemented a little quicker than theirs. And that's really a question for the county. But ICF, is 2 years normal for recovery funds to come to a community? Or well, just for context for our folks in the meeting, because everyone here is really new to this.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've done a lot of work looking at average timelines, working with different clients, and there's a lot of research on it. And just the way that CDBG DR funds are appropriated by Congress and then allocated by HUD, after the fact, HUD often allocates funds for, pools of disasters around the country. So it's not necessarily right after the disaster. And then the fact that CDBG DR is meant for the very last unmet needs in a community impacted by disaster. It's unfortunate, but 2 years is about the amount of time that grantees get their action plan put together and ramp up, launch programs. So, I hate to say it, but it isn't it is typical for the programs to launch, about 2 years, and for folks to not get assistance from CDBGDR in about that time.
Great. Yeah, that's interesting to learn that how it is. We were one of many other communities for a diverse array of natural disasters, floods, fires, you name it. So and yeah, 2 years after, FEMA insurance were in town, there's still a lot of lasting needs. So that is good context to know. Thank you for sharing, Chris. Jaree from our staff has been very patient, and I've been waiting because she's on our team. We've trying to have the public, but she has her hand raised, and you can go ahead and ask away.
Okay, so my question I had was specific to the low to moderate income qualifications. Now, being that this disaster occurred in 2022, would that income qualification be based off FY22 income, or would it be at the implementation of the program? Would the income be based off at the moment in time when the program launches, what your income is at the time of the application? And is there a link or anything that the public can go and view on their own for more context and what their family household looks like in terms of income qualifications?
Yes, the 20.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
I wanted to, I'm on the HUD Exchange now, and they have a FY24 CDBG DR income limit tab, and I will share that in the chat. I've been unable to, so in the meantime, I'm going to send it to Tom. For some reason, I'm able to directly message you right now, Jaree.
Okay.
And then I'm going to send it to Tom so he can put it into the chat for everyone else.
Great.
And then lastly, I saw something in the chat, and I just real quick, I know we're very conscious of the time, but I think that when you look at the buyout program, because I have a little more exclusive knowledge working on the team, I think that there's a misconception that the buyout is to kind of drive minorities out of their homes. That's not the case. When an area is bought out, it's turned into a green infrastructure. If anyone can on our team can elaborate on that a little bit more, because I have somebody that's on the call with me that kind of has the same sentiments, and I'm trying to convey that if the CDA does buy out a home, that is not going to be a home that's going to be turned back for profit for the city. It's going to become a green infrastructure. If you guys can elaborate on that a little bit, I would appreciate that.
Okay, absolutely, Jerry. And I would love for our team to jump in, especially on any gaps. So the first thing I want to lift up is that this is a voluntary buyout program, so it's not forced. If you have been experiencing floods for generations, or you know that this block always floods at this time and you just want to out, it's voluntary for you to enter this program. The other thing I want to lift up is we've done some data analysis from MSD to see where it's a lot of flooding that happens throughout the city. And then, as Chris mentioned earlier, being in a floodplain and other data points, it's definitely not to repurpose the house for another house, and it will be turned into green infrastructure. And then have also thought about like permeable alleys. And I don't know if anybody has gone to it's Hamley and Manchester, where they have that really cool green infrastructure. I know Tom can speak more to that, because that was an area that had flooding all of the time, and they used some recovery, some mitigation to create a park and greenway and an amazing space.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Rashonda said, and Shuri, thank you for bringing that up. I know that's a pretty sensitive topic, and we want to make sure we're straightforward addressing it. That, yeah, Exactly, 100% voluntary. No one, absolutely no one will ever be forced to give up their home. And when these buyout programs are, fair market value. So absolutely voluntary. And that was a good example, Rashonda. Lisa and I took a tour. Was that this spring? It was such a nice day. The new Brentwood Park, if you've ever seen that in Brentwood, where Manchester used to flood down at the bottom of that hill if you're coming home from the Galleria. And this program is not the same as that because that's a huge focus, concentrated, brand new park. But that area was just flooding so much that they turned it into not just a basin to collect all that water so it didn't flood homes and businesses, but they added probably the coolest playground, in the region. I try and only brag about the city of St. Louis, but they really built a really nice park over there. So that's what these areas, if we do voluntary buyouts, would become, common space with features. There's no way it would ever be sold at profit to a developer for any reason. It's in the action plan that it has to become common green space for everyone to enjoy.
Yeah, and just to reiterate and add to that, HUD does not permit a buyout unless the property is maintained as green space in perpetuity. So, as a requirement, the city can't repurpose it and develop on it, other than to have a public amenity as a park or some kind of recreation facility. So that comes down from HUD.
Great. I don't see any more hands raised. There are some comments in the chat that, we can address. Kelia says that no, that isn't really a good comparison. I think she's correct. That was a major project that was millions more for one area than just this thing. But I just wanted to kind of illustrate that areas could become more green, and that's a good illustration, but is definitely not an equal comparison. So I agree with you, and thank you for pointing that out. The Gamble family was referring to the timeline to receive repairs without assistance or delayed assistance that will inevitably cause families to relocate. In terms of the comment about, I think minority families, as we look at the map of where the floods were affected, that minority families, it's true, are more vulnerable and going to get hit more, receive more pain and damage and loss from this flood. And so that's why we are working on this timeline as quickly as possible. And we understand that it's 2 years after. So we want to, now that we have been awarded 2 years after, we want to move as quickly as possible. And we're absolutely committed and dedicated to moving quickly and also hearing the needs of the community via forums like this. Is there anything else I should add, CDA team?
That this recording will be available at a later date. We'll put it onto our CDBG DR website. I see that Antonio had asked about that. I believe that's the only other thing that we can offer. This recording will. Uh-oh.
Sorry, that was me. It is on YouTube right now, being live streamed, and I just put the link where it'll be permanently live streamed on YouTube. But we'll go ahead and, as you said, Rashonda, post it on our website and do a follow-up in an email newsletter that this conversation is available. Kilia, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. She says in the chat, thank you for all the information, taking the time to explain this. Without seeing any new questions or hands and being just 14 minutes over, that's pretty good. Is there anything from CDA staff or ICF team that you would like to share before we go ahead and close this meeting, let everyone get back to their evenings. Rashonda, do you want to share our thanks to the community for joining us and our wonderful CDA team and consultant team?
Absolutely. Gracias, merci. Thank you. Good night, everyone. This is our email should you want to follow back up with us. And we look forward to more comments and sincerely thank you for the ones that you've given us this evening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
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 And thank you, STL TV, for moderating this.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Couldn't do without you.
Nope. Thanks.